Bible reading this evening can be found in the Bible on the shelf in front of you on page 1211. That's Hebrews 12, starting at verse 18. Headed The Mountain of Fear and the Mountain of Joy. And the early verses reflect the time in the Old Testament when Moses was with the children of Israel. Hebrews 12, verse 18. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom and storm, to a trumpet blast or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we, if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Amen.
Thank you, Derek. Is following Jesus really worth it? We're coming near to the end of our series on Hebrews, and if you've been with us during it, you'll know that that's really the question of this book, because the book of Hebrews is written to people who have been shaken by life. Problems and difficulties and sufferings and persecutions have shaken them to the core. And the writer of Hebrews is helping them face the brutalities of life without caving in, of finding ways to stand firm when everything around them is falling apart. These Christians were tempted to pack in their profession of faith in Jesus and to go back to what they had before, which was Judaism in their case. I wonder if you can relate to that feeling of questioning, is following Jesus really worth it? Or whether you know of other people in that situation. I sometimes ask that question when I'm with my rugby mates. I often get mocked for being a Christian. And I've just come back from a weekend in Bath with the Weber extended family. And there was about half Christians, half non-Christians. And most of those who now say they're not Christians had some experience of Christianity and have rejected Jesus. Or when I'm with foster carers, they don't really understand why I want to have a faith in Jesus. And tonight we get to the place that is the rhetorical climax, I think, of the book of Hebrews, because the Hebrews writer is pulling all the threads together of the book. And before he gets to the application in chapter 13, he is saying, here's how you live an unshakable life. And in an unstable world where things are always changing, here's how you live an unshakable life. But firstly, we'll think about the shakeable life, which is from verses 18 to 21. And one of the keys of understanding this passage is that verse 18 and verse 22 start with the same verb. If you haven't got the passage open, please open it. And it's a significant verb. Verse 18 says, "You have not come." And then verse 22, "But you have come." Now, there's lots of words you can use for come or approaching in Greek. And this is not a word which means just to move from one geographical place to another. This word for come has very deep religious and spiritual meaning. It refers to the fundamental spiritual approach to God and life. And everyone has an approach like that, and I can help you discover yours by asking you a few questions. How do you face life? How do you cope with troubles? If someone criticizes or questions you, how do you respond to them and to yourself? How do you face yourself in the mirror? Or if there is a God, and let's just assume there is a God for a moment, if there is a God and he were to appear and call you to account, how would you cope with that? What would you refer to? What would you talk about? How do you face that? And the answer in our society to all of those questions, in almost every case, is the same. Because it's the default mode of the human heart. It's what we often say to ourselves, to others, and to God. And it's this: I've tried my best. I've decided what my standards were and what kind of life human beings should live. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I've tried my best. And to be honest, I'm better than a lot of people. I think I've done okay. I'm a good person. That's how most of us face life. But the question is, are you a pretty good person? Am I a good person? And I'm afraid to say the answer is no. Because our thinking is flawed. The honest truth is we've not really tried our best. We've not come close to our own standards, let alone anyone else's standards. Let me speak personally here. Let me give you a glimpse into the heart of Paul Weber. Let's take the golden rule: treat others as you would want to be treated. And when I look at my own life, I don't think there's been a single day of my life when I've worked as hard at understanding other people as I want them to understand me. I haven't even come close. I want them to empathize and appreciate what I'm going through, but I don't care the same about others. Or I don't meet the needs of other people with the promptness and energy of how I want people to meet my needs. I don't even come close, not even close. And so it's a sham to say, oh, I'm not perfect, but I do live up to good standards, because no one does. We are all moral failures. We are glorious ruins. And everybody on this earth is a moral failure. And the fakeness of the way in which we look at ourselves and face life is revealed in this famous incident in verses 18 to 21 at Mount Sinai. Because this is describing the powerful encounter between the Israelites and God. God came down on Mount Sinai and he gave them the 10 Commandments. And the people get close. They drew near. And as they drew near to God, they did not have a warm, cozy experience. They were shattered. They felt as shaken as the mountain was shaken by the presence of God, by the voice of God. And the Hebrew writer, with great eloquence, confronts them with 7 negative experiences to show us how shattering and devastating an experience the nearness of God was to the Israelites. The writer says in verse 18, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched, or that is burning with fire, to darkness, to gloom, to storm, to a trumpet blast, to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them." When God began to speak to them, they didn't say, "Wow, it's the voice of God." They said, "Stop." They didn't say, "Isn't this great?" They said, "We can't take it anymore." And every time in the Bible, when the presence of God comes close, or comes close in a building or a mountain, it is fatal to go near. And Moses is trembling with fear. It was an awful experience in the Old Testament to get near to God. Now, why would this be? Well, one of my friends was talking to one of the administrators at a top university in the country, and the administrator said, "You have no idea on university campuses the enormous pressure there is from the students to do grade inflation. Everybody wants a first or a 2-1. And here's the reason why. The young people who get into the top universities have always got A's or A stars. They've always been the smartest in their class. And here's the issue. It's not simply that they're used to being the smartest and getting A stars, but being smart and being the top in their year is how they face life and themselves. It is their foundation and their identity, he says. And the thing about being at a good university is that you're in a lecture room full of people who are being used to being top of their class in school in 6th form. But most people at university won't be top of the class because you can't have everyone at the top of the class. And they are shaken to the core, he said. And in this passage we read, when these people came into the presence of moral brilliance and perfection, they realized that their good works and their motives were warped and corrupted and fake. And if you rely on religion and what you can bring to God for your acceptance, you will rightly be filled with fear. Or if you rely on the amount of money you earn to give you purpose, or how beautiful or handsome you are when you look in the mirror, then there will always be someone with more money or is better looking than you are. So what's the other option? The other option is the unshakable life. Verse 22. But you have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. Now, what exactly is that saying? Well, in the Old Testament, Jerusalem was the spiritual capital city of God's people. It was perched on Mount Zion. And Psalm 122 tells us how they used to go up to Jerusalem for spiritual gatherings, for festivals. And those were the times when, instead of feeling scattered and vulnerable out there in the world, they felt this great sense of belonging and security together. And the prophets took up that picture and said, that's how it'll feel at the very end of time, when God's Messiah, his special anointed one, wraps up history. When instead of being scattered and vulnerable in an unbelieving world, God's people will finally be together and secure. And there won't be anyone to shake them anymore. So the prophets talked about heaven as the new Jerusalem, the new Zion. And that's what Hebrews does here too. And it's emphasizing the society of heaven, the community of heaven, the wonderful experience it will be of living in a population made up of 100% of believers. And believers who are finally perfect, who no longer rub you up the wrong way, and who are a dream to be with. Where people will live out the golden rule of thinking about each other better than themselves. Because they will be perfect and will be reflecting the character of God, whose city it is. And this God for all eternity has been other person-centered. The Father, before they made the world, the Father has been glorifying the Son, and the Son has been honoring the Spirit and the Father, and the Spirit has been loving the Father and the Son. And this passage says that's your future. But it doesn't. It doesn't actually say that. Because in verse 22, it doesn't say you will come to that one day. Look what it says. But you have come to Mount Zion. You have come to that. Because as the Bible sees it, being part of a church family here, is now a kind of foretaste, a pilot, an appetizer, albeit an imperfect one, of the community of heaven, the society of heaven. And in verse 23, the word for church means assembly or gathering. It's about people, which is why church isn't this building. It's not 69 above Bar Street. It's the people gathered in this building tonight and whenever Christians gather together this week. And the point being made here is not that heaven will be like one eternal church service with song after song after song. No, it won't be. The point is that any church gathering, like this one today, or your home group, or any other kind of small group, should give you a foretaste of what heaven will be like. And that is of a perfect family enjoying one another's company, where we care for and love for one another as much as we love ourselves. And that's why we need to spend quality time with other Christians. And when we're there, to go deep with them, to be vulnerable with one another, with each other, and trust each other. So the wrong attitude is to come here or to come to your small group just thinking, what can I get out of this? Now, on the one hand, it is good to come with an expectant heart. What is God going to say to me? But we also come thinking, how can I contribute to make this group a foretaste of heaven for those around me, so that I can help send them back into this fallen and difficult world, encouraged to live another week for Jesus. So he's saying Christian community at its best is a foretaste of heaven and should leave us thinking about heaven all the more and looking forward to heaven all the more and believing that heaven will far outweigh the costs of getting there. That's the point of the end of verse 22, which talks about thousands and thousands of angels in joyful assembly. Now that phrase, joyful assembly, is a very unusual word. It could be translated an extreme party or a place of all-night laughter. Now why is heaven described like that rather than a kind of very kind of middle-class tea party with cucumber sandwiches or something like that? It's not that. And it's because it's a fantastic place to be. Not that cucumber sandwiches are bad. But this is about, it could be translated a revelrous party. It's the party of all parties, and it's worth the wait and all the hard work now. As many of you know, the Football World Cup started this week, and I don't know who will lift the trophy on Sunday the 15th of July. I doubt it'll be England, to be honest, although they have a better chance than Wales do of winning it. But after winning the World Cup, there will be an almighty party for that team on that Sunday evening. And if you ask the players, was it worth it? All the hard work and training and being away from your family and friends and the scrutiny of the media and pushing your body to its limits for so many matches through the tournament. Was it worth it, you'd ask? They would look at you bewildered and say, of course it was worth it, because the prize is worth the price. And the medal makes the cost pale into insignificance. And that is what heaven will be like. Our suffering will be light and momentary compared to what we're experiencing then. This week I came across a fantastic little book called The Saints' Everlasting Rest by Richard Baxter, who was a Christian writer in the 1600s. And this book has been updated, and it's a PDF, and you can download it from the internet. And we've put the link there on the front of the bulletin. And it's a wonderful attempt at describing what heaven will be like. And in one chapter, he imagines a believer who's just arrived in heaven and just beginning to take it in and realizing, as a result, how feeble his view of heaven had been on earth, and finding himself ashamed that he ever questioned whether following Jesus was worth it. Let me read you some of it. From heaven's height, the Christian surveys the promised land. Looking back on earth, the Christian views the dreary wilderness through which it passed. To stand on Mount Memory, comparing heaven with earth, fills the Christian with unimaginable gratitude and makes him exclaim, "Is this the inheritance that cost so much as the blood of Christ? No wonder, O precious price! Is this the result of believing? Have the gales of grace blown me into such a harbor? Is this where Christ was so eager to bring me? Oh, praise the Lord! Is this the glory of which the scriptures spoke and of which ministers preach so much? I see the gospel is indeed good news. Are all my troubles, Satan's temptations, and the world's scorns and jeers come to this? O vile nature that resisted so much and so long such a blessing. Unworthy soul, is this the place you came to unwillingly? Was duty tiresome? Was the world too good to lose? Could you not leave all, deny all, and suffer anything for this? Were you loath to die to come to this? Oh, false heart! You had almost betrayed me to eternal flames and lost me this glory. Are you not ashamed now, my soul, that you ever questioned that love which brought you here? Are you not sorry that you ever quenched his Spirit's prompting, or misinterpreted his providence, or complained about the narrow road that brought you to such a destination? Now, you are sufficiently convinced that your wonderful Redeemer was saving you, as when he crossed your desires, and when he granted them, when he broke your heart, as when he bound it up. No thanks to you, unworthy self, for this crown, but to God be the glory forever. Let's read verse 22 again. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. What does it mean that we have come, verse 23, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven? Well, this is talking about our identity and where we put our security. Heaven will be an amazing place because it will be filled, because it won't be filled with fear, but of peace. And it'll be an amazing party, as I said before, and we'll never get bored. But the main focus will be Jesus. He is the firstborn, the supreme son in the family. And we are to rejoice that our names are written in heaven. And that last phrase may remind you of another passage in the Bible where Jesus first sent his disciples out to preach and to heal people, and they came back excited about the miracles that they could perform and the supernatural powers that they had. Yet Jesus rebuked them. And in Luke chapter 10, verse 20, he said, "Do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." And if you find your security or your significance or your identity in your achievement, whether that would be about how many people you've talked to about Jesus, or how many people have got healed through you, or how many promotions you've had in your workplace, or if you have a beautiful girlfriend or a handsome boyfriend, if you find your security in anything else than "is my name written in heaven," then it will let you down and you will be shaken. And verse 23 then continues, "You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect." Now, the concept of God being judged may instill fear into you. And if you have not trusted Jesus, then to meet the perfect, all-powerful God is a frightful thing. However, it is different for the Christian. After the passage I read, it continues in verse 24. It says, "We've come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel." Now, what does that mean? So Abel was murdered by his brother Cain in Genesis chapter 4, where God says to Cain, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." And that is, Abel's blood was crying out to God to bring judgment on Cain for his sin. But on the other hand, Jesus' blood shed on the cross cries out a completely different word. It says, not bring judgment, but you can be forgiven of all your sins, even though you deserve judgment for them. So putting those pieces together, believers will meet God as judge, but they'll meet him as forgiven people. So he won't be for judgment in the sense of possible condemnation and rejection, but for judgment in the sense of confidence. Peter O'Brien, in his commentary, put it this way: for the Christian, the mention of coming to a multitude of angels in joyful assembly, with its festive associations, the party analogy, and the description of Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, immediately following the spirits of the righteous made perfect, suggests that this judgment will be positive for those assembled. Because when we meet God, we will be made perfect. And so God the Father will welcome us into his kingdom. And his judgment will be one where he will put the world to right. Like a child whose father is the head teacher of a school, and the child knows he can knock on the door, knowing that his father will welcome him in, even though his dad is the judge of the school. When we meet God, we can be confident that he will say, because Jesus has made us perfect, well done, good and faithful servant. So my friends, are you living in a shakeable life or the unshakable life? Finally, how do we live this unshakable life? 25 to the end. Firstly, focus on the future. Look at verse 25. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. That means God speaks to us in the good news of his son's death and resurrection. And remember, he's talking especially to those on the edge of turning away completely from the gospel. He says, if they, that is largely the unbelieving, God-rejecting generation of Moses' day, if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we, if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? And remember, this warning is so severe because it's addressed to people on the edge of decisively rejecting the gospel. It's not addressed to the ongoing sinfulness of those who are trying to press ahead in trusting and obeying Jesus. So he says, verse 26, at that time, that is Moses' day, God's voice shook the earth, but now he is promised. And then he quotes the prophet Haggai. Once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. And the words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Now we can't unpack all the detail here, but seeing the wood from the trees, it's saying that when God wraps up history through Jesus' return, there will be a shake-up, a judgment of a cosmic scale. It will be, verse 27, it will remove certain things that are created, he says. Now, elsewhere in the Bible, the Bible says, beyond the day of judgment, there will be a new or renewed creation. And this means that believers won't be disembodied spirits floating around on clouds. We will have resurrection bodies in a totally transformed physical creation. Like Jesus could eat and touch people, so we will, and he had a resurrection body, so we will be able to do that as well. And so verse 27 isn't saying there won't be a physical creation at all beyond Jesus' return, but it is saying this present weary and aching creation is going to come to an end. And the point being is that we should therefore hold on to it loosely and to all the stuff and possessions of this life that seem so secure and unshakable, because they aren't. So, for example, back in chapter 10, we saw that some of the Hebrews had lost possessions and even their homes because of their faith. But here in chapter 12, it's saying, look, even if it comes to that, or has come to that, remember that what you've lost and what was taken away with you will be taken away anyway in the great shake-up. So, for example, Rebecca and I are blessed with a wonderful family house, and we're hopefully going to be extending it later this year so we can foster more children. It's taken a lot of work going through planning with the council and getting a loan with the bank and negotiating with the builders, but I'm constantly telling myself to hold on to our house loosely, so that when it's finished and the foster kids come and mess it all up and put things on the wall, I won't be annoyed, because it's God's house and I'm just a steward of it. So keep believing what the gospel says about the end of everything, and you'll avoid the pitfalls of false perceptions and priorities. And then lastly, how not to be shaken is get ready for heaven. Do you believe in this vision of heaven? Do you believe that that through Jesus you're going there? Well, in that case, says the writer to Hebrews, live as someone who's going to heaven. So look at verse 28. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for God is a consuming fire. Now this means let's focus on our future in heaven in a way that really affects our morale and our attitude here and now. And I've learned so much about that from the most senior members of this church, not least from David Sylvester, who's just gone to be with the Lord, and who in his increasing physical decline was looking forward to that. Because where the unbeliever in the shoes of people like David might be full of resentment about poor health and only able to look back on what's been and what's slipping away, the David Sylvesters among us exemplify this attitude of looking forward and focusing on what's to come beyond this life, and of therefore being joyful and grateful in a way that humbles me. It was interesting when he was in hospital about 3 months ago. He said, I want to go home. And people said, who do you want to be with? What do you mean by home? And he said, I want to be with Margaret, my wife. And then about a month ago, he also said, I want to go home. And they said, where do you want to go? And he said, I want to go with Jesus. I want to be with Jesus. So look at verse 28 again. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let's be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. And this word worship is very interesting here, because unlike Christians generally use it today, the New Testament almost never uses the word worship to mean what goes on when we meet in church services, congregational worship. Almost without exception, it uses it to mean our service of God, 24/7, in every area of life, whole life worship. And that's what it means here as well. Chapter 12, verse 28 is saying, serving God rightly now is motivated by knowing we'll be with him in heaven then. It's saying, let's focus on the future in heaven and thus serve him rightly now. So, is following Jesus really worth it? Is it really worth the cost of the hostility we may face? Is it really worth the cost of the ongoing fight against sin? Is it really worth keeping going in faith when God has allowed hard circumstances which you would never have chosen for yourself? Is it worth serving a God who doesn't grant us protection or immunity from the many sadnesses and sorrows and sufferings in this fallen world? Well, Hebrews says, if you weigh up the costs versus the blessings of being a Christian, only taking into account this here and now, you'll always find yourself to be tempted to say no. But if you weigh up the costs versus the blessings taken into account, not just here and now, but heaven and hell as well, the answer will be a yes that enables us to keep going wherever we're going through now and to live life to the full. Let's have a moment of quiet where you can ask, what has God said to you? And what are you going to do about it? Father, thank you that in an unstable and shaking world, we can rely on you, our rock. Thank you that you're the same yesterday, today, and forever. Thank you that we can build our life on Jesus, the cornerstone, the chief stone, the one on which everything else takes its shape and direction. Thank you that Jesus is coming back. And he's bringing in a new kingdom, a new city, a new way of life that we can be part of.